Welcome everyone to the fifth session of our Growing Opportunities in Canadian Agriculture webinar series, where we will be chatting with a diverse group of individuals from the agricultural sector. Today, we are speaking with Mike Scheffel, the Managing Director of Policy and Standards with the Canadian Seed Growers Association and the former National Manager of the Seed Program at the Canadian Food Inspection Agency. Mike, you have a wealth of knowledge in the seed sector and can't wait to hear more about what you have to share with us today. So I'll hand it over to you for a short introduction on yourself and CSGA before we dive into our questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Kelsey, and hello, everyone. It's my pleasure to participate in this webinar today, and it's a good initiative, I think, on the part of Kelsey and the Canadian Agriculture Human Resource Council to provide this information to interested parties. So as Kelsey mentioned, my name is Mike Scheffel. I'm the Managing Director of Policy and Standards at the Canadian Seed Growers Association. The Canadian Seed Growers Association is Canada's national seed crop certification body. That's a little bit of a mouthful and maybe a little bit of a hard thing to get your head around, but essentially CSGA members are farmers who specialize in producing seed for other farmers to plant to grow crops. So CSGA members often will receive breeder seed from the plant breeders who develop new varieties, and they will plant that seed and produce it according to the Canadian Seed Growers Association's rules and procedures for pedigreed seed crop production. And when they do that, that seed is then eligible for final certification by the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, which is the national authority here in Canada for seed certification and seed regulation in general. The Canadian Seed Growers Association was established 120 years ago in 1904, and it was an initiative of the then current senior manager at the Canadian Department of Agriculture, who was quite interested in the possibility of improved quality seeds, improving the state of agriculture in Canada. He had studied a bit in Europe and seen what was going on there and brought some of those ideas back to Canada and initiated the Canadian Seed Growers Association in 1904. CSGA has been a partner with government then for over exactly 120 years now. And while our roles and responsibilities have changed and evolved over time, essentially the Canadian Seed Growers Association manages the production of the seed crop. And this is the seed crop standing in the field, produced by seed growers. And then the CFIA, as the government body responsible for the final certification of seed, takes over after that seed crop has been harvested and during the processing, sampling, testing, and final grading of seed for commercial sale here in Canada.
Great, perfect overview to get us into the seed world, the seed mindset.
Right.
So, if you're in the world of agriculture, you know how important policy and standards and all those elements are to Canadian agriculture. What would you say are some of the elements of policy and standards that are often kind of misunderstood or not recognized by those kind of outside of that agriculture sphere?
Okay, I guess there's a number of different areas where people in general may not appreciate the fact that they're surrounded by products and processes and services that adhere to standards that have been developed either by national, provincial, municipal governments, by international standards development organizations like the ISO, or other bodies that are involved in this area. And standards really are an extremely important aspect of the way we organize ourselves as society, the way that the economy works. We all depend on standards in order to ensure that products, services, meet the requirements and meet the needs of society in general. So there's there's all kinds of different kinds of standards. Obviously, in agriculture, we've got standards for seed that's sold. We have standards for fertilizer. We have standards for livestock feed. We have standards that are important for animal health status. Of course, food safety is top priority for the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, for example. But they also, in addition to doing food, do animal health and plant health types of activities as well. So something that some people may not recognize, you think of the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, and it's quite true that it's Canadian and that it's an agency, but they don't actually do a lot of food inspection, actually, to tell you the truth. They do a lot of work with food producers to make sure that they have systems in place to manage the quality, to manage the safety, to manage all the labeling and requirements for food that goes out there. But it really is up to the producer of that food in many instances to ensure that the standards that the CFIA has developed for those different products have been met. There are a number of different things, like things that the consumer might have as top of mind and issues of concern when it comes to things like food safety. That includes things like pesticide residues, for example. Many people would be concerned with the issue of pesticide residues and really rely on government to ensure that pest control products that are available for use in agriculture are properly reviewed and evaluated and meet the requirements for safety. These days, the ability to test products for very, very low levels of pesticides is huge. We can detect things at levels in parts per billion, for example. And it's always a question, always a topic of concern and issues as to is there a safe level of pesticide residues, for example, and what might that be? So when it comes to the regulation of pesticides, it's actually an organization called the Pest Management Regulatory Authority, PMRA, that is an agency of the Department of Health or Health Canada here in Canada that actually reviews, evaluates, and then approves pesticides for use in Canada. It's a very onerous project. They try to ensure that they're internationally harmonized when it comes to their evaluation of pesticides, but they still need data that was generated in Canada under Canadian conditions in order to be able to determine what that safe level of use might be. They work very closely with their counterparts in the United States and in the EU for sure to do those kinds of things. There's all kinds of other things that in agriculture we hear about, things like right to repair. Sometimes some of these modern, farm equipment restrict farmers from being able to repair their tractors, for example. And that's because they're such complicated, they're really computers on wheels these days. They're adding a lot of value with things like precision planting and driverless tractors and doing all kinds of things that are interesting from that perspective. But there is a movement out there about right to repair and a lot of issues and concerns and policy around how that might play out. Right now, sustainability is a big topic of concern, not just in agriculture, but in all aspects of our life, given climate change and global warming or greenhouse gas emissions, or however else you might want to describe it. And so there are, wherever you look in agriculture, it seems that people are trying to communicate the efforts that farmers and the farming community have made over many years to try to improve the sustainability of food production in Canada. We're still, I think, a ways away from having sort of standardized, uniform national programs, for example, for measuring carbon sequestration in agricultural soils, and developing systems where farmers could maybe benefit from carbon credits if they change their procedures to emit less greenhouse gases and sequester carbon in their soil and these kinds of things. So a lot of different interesting things happening in that area, and be happy to talk later if anybody did have any questions about some of those type of things as well.
Great, thank you so much for the overview of really the whole industry and all the different elements. It was funny for me when I was looking on, I think it was on LinkedIn or something the other day, and someone was talking about baking and how they're using two different types of wheat, and then they're baking, and how the protein content varied and how much that impacted their final results. And that got me thinking back to standards, to that variety component, specifically for seed and whatnot, and how even things like that kind of come back in and play into our everyday lives and how it impacts those kinds of things.
Well, that's a very good example, Kelsey, because as you know, we have in Canada a variety registration system. And for the big major field crops that we have in Canada, including wheat and barley and canola, we have something called a merit-based variety registration system, where not only does a new variety have to demonstrate that it is distinguishable and uniform and stable, so that it meets that definition of variety, but it also has to meet criteria that are sometimes described as value for cultivation and use. So it means that the varieties are tested from the perspective of the farmer that's going to grow them, and does it have the agronomic attributes that would make it a profitable variety to grow on their farm. But it also focuses very much on the quality of the final product, so that the millers and the bakers and the export customers of Canadian wheat, for example, know the kind of quality that they're going to get. And whether it's a Canada Western hard red spring variety, or whether it's an Ontario soft white wheat or whatever, the different types of wheats do have very different end use quality parameters. The hard red springs are perfect for making loaves of bread, for example, and the soft whites are good for cakes and cookies and that kind of thing. So we do have that diversity. The seed certification system here in Canada makes sure that when farmers do buy certified seed of a hard red spring, that they know that they're getting seed of a variety that is accepted not just by the Canadian millers, but by the export markets to which we deliver a lot of our wheat. Up to 80% of our production is actually exported from Canada. So export markets are extremely important to Canadian agriculture.
Yeah. So now we'll go into talking a little bit more about CSGA now that we have that nice broad overview of the industry there. So what are the main elements of focus at CSGA? At least we'll talk about 2024, because I know CSGA has so many important initiatives and things going on. So
right. Okay.
Yeah.
Sure. Well, in 2024, we want to celebrate our 120th anniversary. For one thing, that's coming up in June, and so we're going to have a little bit of a celebration marking that anniversary. But really, the big issues at CSGA right now are, number one is seed regulatory modernization. So several years ago, the Canadian Food Inspection Agency launched a long-awaited review of our seed regulatory framework. Basically, the seeds regulations that are written pursuant to the Seeds Act. And so for the last couple and more years, we've been having meetings with the CFIA, along with other seed sector stakeholders, including Seeds Canada, including producer organizations, and others that have a stake in the seed system. And the purpose of this is to do a comprehensive, holistic review of the Canadian seed regulatory framework, and to bring recommendations forward to CFIA through a seed reg mod working group that's been established, and for the CFIA then to take those recommendations and to develop some new updated regulations for seed. Excuse me. The objective there is to streamline regulations. It's to simplify regulations as much as possible. It's to identify areas where maybe we need more agility and flexibility in the regulations in order to achieve our objectives there in different regards. So this is a very big subject matter for the Canadian Seed Growers Association, because we are a partner with CFIA in delivering the Canadian seed certification system. Some of the seed sector stakeholders have views that are different from our own, and would perhaps like to see a different approach, more deregulation, for example, more market-based, let the consumer decide what they want to buy and how and this kind of thing. And while we recognize that it's important to be able to have a system that encourages the availability of choice for different seed products and that kind of thing, we also know that there's huge advantages to having some regulation that assures minimum quality standards and minimum performance, minimum quality, and things like that too. So it's a little bit of there's a bit of a dynamic going on there between people who recognize the importance of certain standards and regulations to the prosperity and health of the agriculture sector, and others who think that perhaps we could be a little bit more relaxed in terms of that going on. So that's the really number one top issue for CSGA going forward. We're also continuing to work on our own internal governance processes. We have something called a Regulatory Services Committee, which is a committee made up of seed sector stakeholders, including seed growers and seed companies and licensed seed crop inspectors and seed analysts and others who are interested in CSGA's rules and regulations for seed production and the larger seed regulatory framework. And we're in the process of renewing that committee. We recently put out a call for expressions of interest for people to participate on that committee and to provide CSGA with guidance and prioritization of issues that may have come up. So that's something that we're working on. And we've also got a proposal that we'll be going out with soon too, to expand our membership. Currently, our membership is limited to producers who are actually growing a pedigreed seed crop, and we're hoping to open up the membership a little bit more to welcome sort of affiliated organizations and associations that still have an interest in seed certification and want to participate in the governance of this organization to help us continuously improve our products and processes. Yeah.
Great. Lots going on to keep you busy. I know SRM, the seed regulatory modernization, like you said, it's been a many year-long thing, and it's going to be super, super interesting to see kind of where things end up. But I've been trying my best to follow along,
Right.
given my background in seed. But that's great. Thank you so much. So for our last question before we open up for any Q&As from the attendees, as kind of mentioned at the beginning, you previously worked with CFIA National Manager. So what do you think students, or really anyone who's interested, should know about working with government and how those opportunities can kind of differ from private sector?
Okay. Right. So I went to the University of Guelph a long time ago and got a degree in agriculture with a specialization in crop science. And very late in that, in my studies there, I had a particular interest in seed and seed quality and seedling vigor and things like that. And it ended up, taking me down that road. I graduated at a time when there weren't a lot of jobs around. It took me a while to find a job. I lucked out by being offered a position with the Department of Agriculture at the time in the seed division, working on variety registration. It was just a 3-month term appointment, which is often the way that people get government jobs. You get a 6-month term, or you get a 3-month term, and then maybe it gets renewed and maybe it doesn't, and then you do that 3 or 4 times, and then eventually maybe you get the opportunity to compete for a full-time permanent position, and then you're in, kind of thing. Once you're in, you can move around. You're usually able to apply for other jobs, and so the government, working for the federal government, which is the only one that I worked for, it's a great opportunity. Obviously, there's lots of different types of jobs within government. Everything from, I was in a regulatory program. There are lots of policy type of officers. There are agricultural economists. There are human resource type of positions. They have offices right across the country in all kinds of locations. So the ability to, if you're in with the government, there's a wealth of opportunities and possibilities out there, because they have so many different types of jobs, different locations, including foreign postings and things like this. So lots of opportunities. Thing about government is it's a big organization. So you are a very small cog in the machinery of a very large organization, a very large machine. I worked for government for 31 years. It was all in the seed program with Ag Canada to start with, and then with the Canadian Food Inspection Agency once that was created, and my position moved over there. I had great opportunities to travel the country, to even do some international travel with seed standards and that kind of thing. I worked with great people, very enthusiastic and passionate about the work that they were doing, and it was a lot of fun to do that. It was also deeply frustrating at times, because even though at the end of my career, I was like at the top of the seed program, I reported to somebody who reported to somebody who reported to somebody who reported to somebody else who reported to the guy at the top, and maybe the minister or something like that. So even though I had people that reported to me who had people reporting to them, but there were only about 13 of them, you still felt like you were a long way from where the decisions actually get made. Now, you help to influence those decisions. You put policies forward and ideas and recommendations and so on, and you do hope to see them accepted as they go up. But there's so many people between you and the final decision, that it can be frustrating to do it. So about 8 years ago, I retired from CFIA to take this job at the CSGA, at the Canadian Seed Growers Association. Now I'm part of an organization that, yes, we have almost 3,000 members, and we have a board of directors that is that governs the organization. we're only about 12 or 13 people. So I report to the executive director directly. And so it's really nice to be part of like a smaller group, a more dynamic group, a flexible group that has, you know, more opportunities to make decisions quickly, to implement things more quickly, to see the results of your work more immediately. So those, for me at least, I mean, there's lots you could talk about when it comes to government versus private sector. But that's the big difference for me, was sort of being, you know, a small fish in a very big pond, as we say, to maybe, you know, being part of a smaller, more cohesive group altogether. Yeah.
Yeah, getting to see, you know, action something and have it come to fruition within a year's time versus, you know, multiple years stacked up. I remember that being one of the big differences too, right? You know, like you're saying, you get to see your results kind of more immediately as well.
More immediate, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes it takes a long time for things to actually happen in government, because there's so many checks and balances, and there's so many angles that they're looking at. They're governing for all Canadians kind of thing. Like there's stakeholders, so many interested parties. There's, you know, economic consequences and lobbyists, you know, making this argument or that argument. And it can get pretty complicated. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, definitely. All right, so now we will open up for 5-10 minutes here or so of any Q&A. If you have any questions, feel free to just throw them in either the chat or in the Q&A feature here, and we can do our best to answer them. We've had some different comments and stuff, but I don't think any questions have popped up quite yet.
Just while we're waiting for those to come in, one of the things that that CSGA has been promoting in the last few years is this idea that 9 out of 10 bites start with seed. And it's a bit of a catchy phrase that we're trying to use to remind people that almost all the food that we consume originally has its beginning with seed. So even if you're talking about eggs, for example, well, the chicken needs to eat the grain in order to produce the eggs. The grain comes from seed, and therefore even eggs, you can say, start with seed. So that's just a concept. I'm not sure if it's exactly 100% true or not, but it sounds good, and we keep using that until somebody points out that it's not right. But
yeah,
so far so good.
Yeah, it's close enough.
Yeah.
Well, I'll ask you one question. What would you say is in your career what you're most proud of that you've done?
Oh,
Or at least some of the top ones.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to necessarily be the most.
No, it's good. I guess one of the biggest ones was responding to a government initiative that was announced in 2012, that seed crop inspection was going to be privatized in Canada. So for many, many years, for 100 years, government inspectors would be the ones that would go out into the seed crops that seed growers are growing and do the inspection. They walk the field, they look for off types, so plants that are not part of the variety. They complete a report, they send that to CSGA. CSGA determines whether or not CSGA standards have been met. So in 2012, the government said, starting in 2014, we're no longer going to be doing these inspections, and it's going to be done by the private sector. And so we had 2 years in which to organize that whole privatization of the seed crop inspection. So it was a huge effort, led by the team that we put together in the seed section, working very closely with the Canadian Seed Growers Association, working very closely with the private sector to try to identify like who would be interested in doing this. Like it's a job that lasts for 6 or 8 weeks in the summertime, right? Are there enough people out there that would actually put up their hand to volunteer to be a seed crop inspector when it's only 6 to 8 weeks of employment? it was a complicated process to establish parameters so that people who might be interested would know what they were signing up for. It was a huge communications effort, and it was done very successfully in the end. We managed to pull it off, somewhat to our own surprise, but also to the benefit of the seed growing community in Canada and agriculture as a whole. I'm just reminded that, like, during the whole COVID lockdown period back in 2020 and even into 2021, our private licensed seed crop inspectors did not miss an inspection. And this was at the very same time that government inspectors were not able to get out and do inspections of meat plants and food processing plants and other establishments that were involved in that regulated area because of COVID protocols and restrictions and things like that. So the privatization of seed crop inspection actually ended up being a very positive thing for Canadian agriculture, even though it added a lot of cost to seed growers because the government used to subsidize the government inspection, and now they had to pay the full market price for a crop inspection. They still generally talk about what a positive move that was. So that's probably number one. And there's a couple others there, but I think we've probably run out of time, so
yeah,
won't be able to get
well,
into that.
There's one question if you have the chance. We'll see if you have a quick answer for this person on it. They're saying, can students or people from outside of Canada apply for, these types of jobs that you're talking about? Perhaps, government, or I know there's plenty of opportunity in seed in different areas, to get in, but I'll let you kind of speak to that.
I can't really speak to that. I don't really know the rules around temporary foreign workers, and then who can get which jobs with what organizations or with government or not. So I'm sorry, I'm not really the best to speak to that. Probably CARC has some resources on their website that you could direct people to. But just to point out that, again, in agriculture, it's not just about being a veterinarian or being a crop scientist or any of these things. I mean, there's lots of work for people that are computer scientists, software engineers, data analysis, all of these kind of, there's a wealth, there's a broad spectrum of different types of jobs, everything from food safety, biochemistry, and all these kinds of things, right through to inspector type jobs with government as well.
Yeah. I didn't know if you just so happened to have experience with it, if you had noticed anything, but yeah, definitely. For those who are asking interested, feel free to search through CARC's website. There we have information for like newcomers to Canada, the temporary foreign worker program. There's different resources available too for organizations and whatnot to access HR toolkits, which specifically detail how to go about having foreign workers and whatnot. So that could potentially be helpful for different employers and employees out there. But thank you so much, everyone, for your time. We were a little bit over here. Thank you so much, Mike. This was really informative. I hope everyone enjoyed. And this webinar will be made available once the series is done, so that if people would like to come back and look at it, they can. So
just a final comment, Kelsey, if anybody is interested in learning more about the Canadian Seed Growers Association and what we do, we have an excellent website that can tell you all about what we're up to and what we do and how we do it. Just use your favorite browser to go and find us and check us out.
Yeah, I just put in the chat, it's seedgrowers.ca. I threw that in the chat for people if they want to be able to copy and paste it as well. So
okay, yeah,
perfect, great.
All
Thank
right.
you so much.